Good morning. My lounge voice. Okay, great. So thanks for that presentation, Nathan. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Netreach program at Hustle, at Health Initiative for Men. So the way the presentation will go is I'm the program manager for Hustle. Billy, who's with us today, is the physical and virtual outreach and Netreach worker, as well as a community outreach coordinator at him. And then we have Joshua. Joshua, are you still with us?
Joshua?
I am.
Yay! And Joshua Edward, once again, so thanks for being here on your honeymoon. And we were able to recently contract him to actually evaluate the Netreach program, and he'll go over some findings. So it's a three-part presentation. Off we go. Oh, so first of all, I have to say, I'm going to point to these. I love computers shaking hands. Isn't that cute? All right, off we go. So I will talk development. Billy will lead us through some implementation on the ground. Joshua will unpack the evaluation, and then we'll have time at the end for discussion and some questions. That's what we're going to do. So who we are. So quickly, Hustle is an outreach and support program for self-identified men in the sex industry. We also identify and support the needs of experiential youth in Vancouver communities. And so we were a program of Peers Vancouver Resource Society, which was a nonprofit exiting organization for sex workers in the downtown east side, from 2007 to 2011. And more recently, we have been a program at HIM since 2012. And one of the many benefits of being with HIM is that we've been able to broaden our scope and reach more men who have sex with men or MSM communities who may or may not consider themselves part of the sex industry, but may fall on the continuum at some point when we think about sexual exchange. So that's been a benefit. Our approach is based on harm reduction, so it's our physical and virtual resources, information, education, and support that are critical and most important for our services. Benefit maximization, which is a philosophy at HIM, which is harm reduction, but flipping it, coming from an asset base. So we're maximizing the benefit and minimizing the risk of any activity or behavior, hopefully. And then, of course, non-judgmental support. I always like to say here that non-judgmental support is a little unrealistic. It's being aware of our judgments and trying to suspend them in the moment to be able to deliver relevant services and to just stay in the present with somebody when you're supporting them. So meeting people where they're at and supporting them where they're at, and that, that speaks physically as well as virtually. Excuse me. A little bit of a cold. Health promotion, working in the 4 areas of health that HIM works in, so physical, sexual, social, and mental, and our services really cross all those sectors. We need to qualify that legally youth are under the age of 19 are not engaging in sex work. They're actually considered sexually exploited in the eyes of the law. So when we talk about we're working with youth, HIM doesn't actually have youth-specific resources in that context. HIM is working with youth who are between the ages of 19 and, say, 30. So depending on an organization, the mandate for youth, the age mandate, will be different. So we are still working with youth, but we do a lot of referrals to our partners. We are partnered with Family Services Greater Vancouver, primarily, as well as a bunch of other youth resources and programs and organizations. So that's just to be made clear. When we talk about youth are not sex workers or in the sex industry, they're sexually exploited. So youth don't consider themselves sexually exploited many times. That's why we talk about them as experiential youth. So they may see themselves as exchanging sexual services for the purposes of fulfilling needs. So we really meet them where they're at and use their language, but we just have to be mindful of in the eyes of the law. So the rationale for Netreach. So demographics of adult sex work in Vancouver have changed dramatically over the last 10 years. And since Hustle was created in 2007, we have noticed a marked decrease in street presence of men that are in the sex industry and an increase in online activity. So popular tracks and strolls, Boys Town in Vancouver in the 90s and the early 2000s, it was very alive and well and thrived. It was largely an industrial area, but but with the rise of Yaletown and the urbanization, it was pushed out. And then with the advent of the internet, these two things intersected, and more men are online. So that doesn't necessarily mean that if you're in some sort of, if guys are in some sort of survival, whatever that looks like for them, they can still be online because they put all their money into their tech, right? So they have, just as good, if not better tech than I do. And that's because that's their livelihood. But they can be in internet cafes, if they're really marginalized and if they're really entrenched, they can be in underground parking lots, wherever there's a Wi-Fi connection and they actually have access. So traditional methods of sex work were on-street, print advertising, phone chat, escort services. All of those still exist, right? But there is a real decrease in those mediums and a real increase in the platform use online. A marked increase in the number of individuals selling and trading sex online. So as more traditional methods diminish, an increasing number of male sex workers, men who have sex with men and youth, are utilizing the internet personally and professionally in their daily lives. This is a good quote from our friends in the UK who are light years ahead of us, which is actually where a lot of this template for the Netreach program came from, was from the UK. The World Wide Web, chat rooms, social networking sites, and portals are the latest and most rapidly expanding mediums through which sex is sold globally. So the rationale, the online communities continue to rapidly expand, including health resources, forums, chat rooms, blogs. Youth, pretty much since instant messaging came along years ago, youth have been staking a claim in the World Wide Web. They're online, they're creating identities, they're organizing communities, they're taking risks, and we have a unique opportunity to reach out to youth. But the internet, as we know, is also an alarming tool to be able to be used to lure youth into exploitation. But they've staked a claim in the internet, and we have a responsibility to meet them where they're at. We respect their communities and we engage with them on their own terms. Designing the program. When designing Netreach, we attempted to answer key questions. So these questions won't look on different, look a lot similar to how you would design any outreach program, right? Very similar questions to be asked. What need are we attempting to address? What gap are we filling? What goals are we trying to achieve? What strategies will we use? Training required in order to have the skill to deliver the program? Do we have the capacity as an organization to deliver those services? Do we have policy in place around how we do what we do and engaging online? That's an important one. What activities do we need to perform to ensure success, and how will we measure the success when evaluating? So again, these were all questions that we considered when Hustle, first created our outreach program. So they're not any different, but they just modified or adapted to fit the organization and the online culture. So if we look at those briefly, so needs assessment. So we implemented in 2011. That's when we were at Piers Vancouver. We had realized the real decrease in street presence, the real increase in online presence. That was also anecdotally. We were asking our guys, where are you? We're not seeing you on the street anymore. Where are you? And they're all like, we're online, right? We're not on the street anymore. We're online, right? And we're all over the internet. So this was a direct response to the decrease in the presence and an increase in online activity, plus from just word of mouth, what they were saying. We're one of only 3 resources for male sex workers in Canada, and the only Canadian program online, to our knowledge, reaching out specifically to men in the sex industry and experiential youth. Originally, very few resources to help guide our efforts, and program was informed and adapted by UK. So like I said, very progressive over there in UK, Great Britain, lots of great stuff going on. So we adapted a lot of the resources from them. So I just want to get these acronyms right for you and talk a little bit more about what they do. So these are a few of many of the resources that we adapted and that we partnered with in order to create the Netreach program. So NCSD is the National Coalition of STD Directors, and they work towards the development of systematic change and promotion of national awareness in the policies and govern STDs. So they, in 2008, developed an internet outreach guide, which was step-by-step instructions on how they were going to do what they were going to do, and some guiding principles and some policy, which was really important for us when we started Netreach. The Working Men's Project aims to provide quality service for sexual health promotion, HIV prevention, open to men who sell sex or works within the commercial male sex and adult entertainment industries. The Working Men's Project, actually, they developed an internet outreach program, and that's where Netreach was adopted from. And we took a lot of the principles and the policies and kind of the structure of their program, and we adapted it to Netreach. So we didn't come up with this stuff alone. We've certainly borrowed from our friends across the pond. And the UK Network of Sex Work Projects is a nonprofit voluntary association of agencies and individuals working with sex workers in Great Britain. And again, lots of great work there that we've adapted and adopted for Netreach. So, we have goals, and the goals of the program at the beginning were short-term. We wanted to initiate relationships, so again, meeting our folks where they were at online and develop relationships with them. Kind of the reducing the isolation really goes hand in hand with initiating relationships, but we wanted to reconnect, right? Reconnect communities that were now, non-face-to-face. So initiate relationships, reduce isolation. Of course, increase our public awareness of a newer program at HIM. That was a short-term goal when we arrived at HIM. We want to share resources and best practices of how we're doing, what we're doing. Joshua is going to talk a little bit more about the best practices and how that played out in the evaluation. And we're a huge resource and referral hub for web-based, for physical and virtual resources, but lots of web-based resources. And Billy will talk a little bit more about how that all plays out in real time online. Our longer-term goals are, of course, to increase our capacity to foster an internet environment of mutual respect, statistical data information gathering, so really that information gathering to provide evidence for our ongoing efforts, which can help out with further funding and various pieces like that. Social media, internet policy. We're right now working with a couple of partners in community to develop an online outreach guide, primarily for youth service providers, but that can be used broadly. Since we have some best practices, we've been online for a few years. Ongoing training, professional development of how to engage online ethically. Develop our best practices, some of which came out in the evaluation, and develop an internet outreach training guide, which I spoke about that we're in the process of doing. So, strategic planning. So we had a strategic plan at the beginning, and we continue to adapt it and to try and follow it. Of course, we talked about it, so we had our rationale, we had our program goals. I'll talk a bit more about policy, which is really important to help guide our efforts. Training is really important. I have a slide that talks about a bit of the training that we do. Budgets and funding. So when we first started Netreach, it was really off the side of our desk. It was as part of our larger outreach initiative. So we didn't have any specific dollars to put or resources to put into Netreach. So when Nathan was talking about, sometimes it was just you have a website or an app open and you're doing your other work and you're also doing that. So that's how we started the program. More recently, we've gotten some specific funding. We got funding to continue our online services and also evaluate them, and that was in the past year. And so with that evaluation, hopefully, the evidence will be supported that we can apply for specific grants and say, hey, this is like a need. This is, we need to fund it specifically and give it the resources that it deserves. Continue to build community partners, which is really important. We don't do this alone, so it's a resource and referral hub. Billy will talk more about that. Our evidence-based research, we're researched with a number of partners right now looking at health impacts for men in the sex industry, both physically and virtually. And so those, again, providing evidence to support our continued work and the evaluation, which Joshua will talk about. I think it's important here that the evolution of Netreach continues at HIM, but we recognize that life online is a process, not an event. So it's not like, bam, now we're online, this has happened. It's constantly changing, which is a bit of a negotiation and a bit of a dance that we have to do, is that we have to really be, one of the things is if you're going to be online, you need to be online, right, all the time. And that's a challenge because we don't have the resources to be online all the time at this point. And that came out in the evaluation, is that that's limiting for us. But it's a conversation, and it's a dynamic conversation. We need to be there as often as possible. We want to make sure that all levels of the organization are buying into online outreach. So that's a thing, just maybe sort of like a kind of a little tip, is that, all levels from your board of directors to your administration down to program and then frontline, we all have to be on the same page about why we're where we are, what we're doing, and how we're doing it. Design and development, so training. So training is really important, for the Hustle program. At Health Initiative for Men, we have some pretty good core training. And these are some of the areas that we touch on when we get into a specific outreach training module at the end, when you break out and you decide that you're going to volunteer or work in it for a specific program. These are things that we're looking at that are really important. Again, a lot of these things are very similar or the same as if you're doing physical outreach, right? We're just adapting according to an online culture. So there are some specific, added pieces. You'll see your social media communication 101, which is important, your non-face-to-face communication and crisis intervention, privacy and confidentiality in an online setting. Diversity and competencies is really important too. It's just like how are, the current language and the competencies of how we're talking online to folks, lots of youth who are experimenting with identities, gender variant, gender fluid. We need to be sensitive and competent in how to be talking to youth online and to anybody that we're talking with. I have to gotta speed it up here a little bit. So policy. Okay, so policy. When we first started the program at Peers, we had a forward-thinking board at administration who said, develop a little bit of policy just to guide your efforts and jump online. And since moving to HIM, we've been able to integrate into larger organizational policy, which looks at social media, social communication, and online outreach, because HIM does a lot of work online. Had done a lot of work online already. So we're talking about respecting organizational culture and integration, transparency and disclosure. Transparency is we legitimize ourselves as a trusted resource online, and we don't just let them take our word for it. We say, hey, go to our website, check out who we are. If Billy's online, he's like, I have a profile, I have a name, you can legitimize us. It's really important. Support and counseling light, how to do that online. We shy away from counseling. It's more like support, and then just driving them to the resources that are online that they need. Documentation, really important, right? Keeping stats and logs of every communication, every message that goes out, every message that comes in, not unlike physical outreach where you would keep a log of those stats as well. Privacy and confidentiality, making sure that everybody online knows, look, we will do the best that we can to protect your privacy and confidentiality, but we can't do that concretely because we're online. Right? So it's important that that conversation happens and is fluid, continues to happen. And of course, always developing new guidelines because the internet is ever changing. Sustainability, these are the things that we do to help hopefully ensure the ongoing sustainability of the program. We set and achieve those short and long-term goals. So far, so good. Lots of success. The evaluation, which Joshua will talk about, and the evaluation talks about best practices and recommendations, evidence to support the need for further funding and resources, diversify the funding, key findings, and of course accountability. And accountability is part of that evaluation because it includes voices of the participants of our program. And always a shout out to our funders. Yay, thank you funders. And specifically, more recently, the Ministry of Justice was has been our funder for the Netreach program. They support ongoing efforts as well as the evaluation that Joshua will talk about. And this is implementation, so I'll leave it there.
Okay, hello, thanks for coming and good morning. I'm Billy. I'm basically in charge of the Netreach program, which we run once a week at this point. So as far as implementation goes as our team, online outreach behaves the same as traditional community-based or street outreach. What that means is we always have at least 2 staff or volunteers teamed up together at any given time. The biggest reason for that is, of course, accountability and effectiveness, and we also have that put in place just for the fact of debriefing. Just like street outreach, crisis situations do come up online, and they actually come up probably with greater frequency than we're seeing on a street outreach, especially because a lot of the sites that we're working across, we do come in contact with a lot of youth. And a lot of these youth are in exploitative situations, or they're in situations where they may be at risk of exploitation. So there's lots of conversations with youth who are in difficult situations, who may be in a difficult situation in the future, and that sometimes the online outreach actually turns into a texting situation. A lot of the times, not just with youth, but with men as well, they'll give us a phone number or they want our phone number and they'd rather communicate via text, which of course we offer. But we do need an opportunity for debriefing, and as well as for accountability, 2 people on staff at all times. Volunteers and staff must complete our HIM Institute training, which is always being looked at and always being modified and updated, just to make sure that we're on top of everything properly. This was actually something that was mentioned earlier, talking about our presence on different websites and how we legitimize that with the administrators and the moderators of the different sites. Before we go anywhere, before we make a profile on any site, we always send contact to administrators and moderators. We do this because, first of all, we want to make sure that every step of the way we're as legitimate as possible. The last thing that we want is to get banned from a site where we could potentially be offering outreach services. For the most part, this has actually been excellent building relationships with the various sites that we find ourselves having a presence on. For an example, when we made a profile on Bareback RT, we were originally told that we could not because they don't have community partners, they don't have health organizations that have profiles on there. We went directly over the heads of the site administrators to the actual site owner, and he gave us a profile. We're marked, we have a special icon that says that we're a health organization that enables us to contact people, whereas it's a site that typically you can't, as a health organization, reach out and contact people first. You have to wait for them to approach you. But because we've been always open and very frank with what we're doing on the different sites, we've been given a bit of allowance there, which is very important. Some sites like Vampire Freaks, which is where we meet most of our youth and talk to most of our youth, we're still forbidden from going to the majority of the boards. We can't go to the 18 under board, we can't go to the 30 and over board, but we can stay on the in-between boards. Squirt, for instance, that's one where we were just made a profile, we sent in, they didn't care, they were just happy that we were there, and that was the end of it. We have our information always listed on our profiles. That includes worker names, direct email addresses, a site to our website so they can legitimize us. And like Matthew said, we don't just want them to take our word, we want them to go and investigate and make sure that they are talking to who we say we are. Sorry, I can't see very well, I don't have my glasses on. Oh, that's it. So this is our presence. These are the sites that we're currently the most active on. Squirt, Manhunt, Bareback RT that I just mentioned, Craigslist, Ursula and Canadian Mail. With several of these sites, you don't actually need to have any kind of profile for contacts. So of course, this makes it a lot easier on our end. We just send out our messages, we send out our contacts, we search for people who perhaps are either looking for behaviors that may mark them as being slightly more at risk than others, or people who are clearly using coded language that implies that they're selling sex or exchanging sexual services for other services. Much like traditional outreach program and community, online outreach meets people where they're at, which is something that Matthew mentioned, follows the same basic principles, guidelines, and values when providing support, services, resources, and referrals in a virtual setting. The biggest offer that we have as an online service, and we'll get into this a little bit later, is information and referrals. So we always try to have as much up-to-date and relevant information as we possibly can going into any shifts. The sites that we're on, especially when we're talking about the cruising sites and the hookup sites, the ongoing process has been kind of looking at apps. We're still kind of trying to find the best way that we can actually be present on the different apps and be present in a way that's legitimate and useful, essentially, because at this point we're still trying to find the best way to go about that. This is a big piece. Confidentiality online, what does that even mean? And how do you even know that what the information that you're getting is accurate? When we're sitting here and we're receiving disclosures from people, we work on the basis that what they say is true. We don't have any proof of that. We don't have any way of confirming that some of the time, but we have to operate on a basis that we're getting true information. If we're getting disclosures of sexual or physical abuse, we report our concerns to cybertip.ca immediately, and sometimes that may mean a follow-up with the RCMP. This is another reason why we want to staff on, because this is a situation where it's important to have accountability, and it's important to have people that you can be there to support them as well. All our logged information is stored offline to ensure protection. This looks like storing it offline in a flash drive that's in a drawer that is locked. And that we treat it the same way that we do all of our physical information as well. It's just as important, even if it's a username, it doesn't matter. It's the same kind of confidentiality and privacy we extend to all of our clients. Despite our best efforts, people don't always find the resources or answers they need on their own. So this comes back to the virtual socks. What do we have on offer for what we have on street outreach? We have physical things that we can give people. We can give them harm reduction supplies, we can give them socks, we can give them food, any other extra little things that we're given from our different partners, such as sleeping bags, you can provide that instantly. Online, what do you really have as an outreach worker? Why would people want to talk to you when they can either just go to Google themselves? Well, that's because the information isn't actually that easy to find. When we're dealing with people online, we're not just dealing with people in the Lower Mainland or even just in Vancouver and our related cities. We're also dealing with people in Ontario, in Phoenix, Arizona, overseas. We've had a whole bunch of people come to us because they simply have nothing local, they don't know how to find it, or they don't even know where to begin. We also have to be able to legitimize the resources we're giving people just like we legitimize ourselves. We wouldn't want to send someone to a resource that either can't meet their needs, has no idea what they're talking about, or worst of all, is defunct. So a lot of the time when we're doing our Google searching and our calling around, we actually have to speak to someone, hear a voice on the other end of the phone confirming for us, yes, we're still active, and yes, we can help this person. I went a little quicker than I thought I would. So.
Are you there?
I am here.
You're on.
All right. Greetings, everyone, from Modena. Italy, part of Emilia-Romagna, which is where all of the Parmesan, balsamic vinegar, prosciutto, all of that food comes from. It's also the center of gay rights and social services in Italy, specifically in Bologna, which is about half an hour away. So kind of a perfect place for me to join you from. And funny anecdote to get us started, I think Matthew was really horrified when I said, I'm going to be on my honeymoon during the conference. And then we realized that it could be kind of an interesting example of the change in interaction that really is taking place globally, specifically around the use of the internet and the use of new and exciting outreach platforms. And I said, well, why don't I call in? We originally thought I could Skype in or something like that, but decided to limit it to phone call. So the Netreach Evaluation was funded by the Ministry of Justice, really to help keep the program accountable to the populations we serve by ensuring that services were current and informed by participants. Specifically, we used a 44-question web-based survey which addressed a range of evaluation criteria from the Netreach program, everything from basic internet access to what their peers might think of program promotional materials, covering the entire gamut of the program. The focus was really on the development of an evaluation that was very participant-driven and was really oriented towards allowing participants themselves to speak for their experiences with the program in a way that would not only allow us to measure the success of the program for funders or from a public health perspective, but really would allow us to measure the success of the program for the participants themselves. So we really sought to examine participant attitudes and beliefs about the efficacy of Netreach and to look at both attitudes of individual male sex workers and men who have sex with men in the sex industry, as well as their thoughts and perceptions of their friends and peers also working within the industry. And this was important just in so much as we wanted to create a platform that from a social norms perspective would encourage as much honesty and reflection as we could possibly get from the participants. So by asking what, yes.
Sorry, can you just let me know when you want me to click a slide?
Oh yes, absolutely. So we included the piece about the peers specifically to allow them a chance to not only provide honest feedback about what their peers might think, but also possibly give answers that they might not say, oh, I feel this way, yeah, but my peers might. Next slide, please, Matthew. So the evaluation structure, as I noted, was 44 questions. We used an online platform. We had an original recruitment goal of 20 to 25 online interviews. Far exceeded that. Got 34 combined surveys and interviews. We did 9 total in-person interviews. We used the same questions for both cohorts, whether they were in person or online, in order to be able to cross-tabulate all the responses and to allow us to really compare those two samples across both platforms. So all the same questions to each group, and then tabulated all of the responses with the online survey platform. Next slide, please, Matthew. So I would say first and foremost, the key findings were that 92% of respondents have regular access to the internet. 69% of respondents report maintaining profiles on an average of 1 to 5 sites, and almost a third maintain profiles on 5 to 10 sites. And 58% of respondents spend around 1 or 2 hours a day maintaining profiles on the identified sites, and 25% of respondents spend over 4 hours a day visiting sites on which profiles are maintained. And actually, if you would go back one slide, Matthew, the participants were recruited in person at Boys R Us drop-in and on websites and classified services that we use through Netreach. And this, I would say, was one of the limitations that we did face, was that in terms of both providing online outreach and in attempting to recruit participants for the survey, we really were limited in being able to contact individuals directly on some of the platforms. And Billy would be able to say exactly, but I believe there's only 2 websites that we're currently on in which we can contact participants and that we don't have to wait for participants to contact us. So the online portion in particular, we really put it out there that we're completing the survey and had to just kind of utilize a wait and see approach for participants to click on the link and complete the survey. But I would say all things considered did very, very well. Total numbers from 2011, for the beginning of the evaluation period until the evaluation period ended, we had seen over 1,092 staff and volunteer and participant interactions. Okay, so back to the slide with the circles, Matthew.
Got it.
There we go. Apologies, it's difficult not being able to see the same thing that you guys are saying. So in terms of the very, like I said, key findings, I would say the thing that stands out the most is really, really, really high levels of satisfaction with Hustle and the Netreach program. We actually had 100% of respondents report that they had satisfactory or very satisfactory experiences with the program. 54% of respondents felt that the program's weekly online outreach sessions were inadequate. I think it's really important to note here that what that refers to specifically was the fact that the online outreach session itself right now is limited to happening once a week. And so that's what they were asked about. That doesn't refer to the content of the program or their interactions, but really just they felt like they would like to see a lot more online outreach than just that once a week platform. 88% of respondents felt that their peers had satisfactory or very satisfactory experiences, which was great. And then again, in an area for improvement, 45% reported that hours of delivery were inadequate or somewhat inadequate for their peers. And again, the hours of delivery refers mostly to the fact that right now the online outreach is taking place 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Saturdays once a week. Next slide, please. Referrals, again, an area in which Netreach and Hustle have really excelled. Over 90% of respondents indicated that they would strongly refer or recommend Hustle and Netreach to another person. And we did not have a single respondent report that they would not refer or recommend anyone to the program. And again, asking about the peers, 73% indicated that they believe their peers would strongly refer or recommend the program to others. So really reflecting, I think, the quality of service and the quality of interactions between program staff, volunteers, and participants, that we see those kinds of numbers of folks that are getting the word out to their peers, to their friends, that this is basically a best practice program. This is a program that consistently delivers what participants most need. Next slide. In terms of next steps, so clearly we have a lot of participant satisfaction, specifically in providing support and services to participants. And transition from on-street to online, as Matthew noted in the introduction, is continuing to gain recommendation or gain momentum. Recommendations at this point include, as Billy noted, diversifying funding streams to reflect that when you're working in an online platform, you don't know where the participants are coming from. We've provided answers to questions from individuals all across North America, all around the world, and while they don't represent the majority of our interactions with individuals and participants through Netreach, it's definitely something that staff and volunteers are aware of. So really recognizing that we should be getting some support from possibly international agencies to help us with those, cross-border interactions. Something that I think we all found really, really interesting was we heard a lot of feedback specifically about maintaining a real mix of online and offline outreach to increase visibility. And whether it reflects back on some of the limits that certain websites place on the way that we are able to contact or interact with participants, or whether it's just the way that people really prefer to hear about programs like this, we consistently heard participants and individuals recommend maintaining or even increasing the quote-unquote offline promotional materials that we use to advertise the program. Most of the individuals who participated in the program did not learn about the program online, which was something we were really surprised about. So they were interacting with us online, but most reported hearing about the program via cards, pamphlets, brochures, or posters that they saw around town. And they really encouraged us to maintain and continue to develop that. We heard a lot of requests for promotion in free community papers, a call for smaller or more discreet promotional items such as business cards that could be tucked in a billfold or a wallet and used when somebody needed to get online and access support. And again, a concentration of outreach efforts for this online service in offline places, community bathhouses, places where men who are working in the sex industry might be going in the quote-unquote real world. So that was a surprise, I think, for all of us that we're doing well and people are engaging with us online, but they're still learning about us and still disseminating information about us offline. Related, we heard calls for some more specific Netreach branding and promotion to differentiate the program a little bit or make it recognizable as a unique component of Hustle and not the same thing as Hustle. And we heard a big call for more focus on social networking sites versus dating and escort sites. So a lot of participants indicated that they might be more comfortable engaging, for example, in a platform like Facebook than engaging on an escort-specific website. And across the board, I would say the one thing that we heard loud and clear was really participants wished that we had additional funding that would provide better hours and staffing. Almost all of the feedback that we did get that indicated areas of improvement related to pretty much structural limitations that the program currently has because of funding constraints. Next slide. So I think in conclusion, the one thing that we really know is that as with any community or population, male sex workers and other men working within the sex industry or a diverse community, really unique voices, thoughts, and perspectives. And online outreach is demonstrating tremendous potential, but I would say my key takeaway in kind of stepping back and observing is that at this point, it really is a complementary effort to traditional outreach services, and it's really an innovative supplement, but it's not yet a replacement. And I think all of us, Matthew, Billy, and I would agree with this, that it's great and it's exciting and it's new, but it shouldn't be viewed as a cheaper or low-cost alternative or something that could replace traditional outreach, at this point. And I think that's it for the evaluation slides.